Hello and welcome to a very special episode of The Wolf Digest. I'm your host, Amaras.
And I'm your co-host, Terkanil. Today we are picking up on, well, the pre-day of CES. Technically it starts tomorrow.
But we've already had a load of crap come out. I mean, just shovelfuls of some great stuff. We had keynote talks from not just Nvidia, but Intel as well today.
And Samsung.
And Samsung, can't forget them.
That was a big one.
We've also had some game announcements, or at least some game studio releases today.
Show-offs.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a hardware that we might touch on a little bit.
Just
for fun.
You got to cover
I say this is going to go a while, so I say we just jump into it and go for it.
Yeah. Hold on to your hats. We're going to try to blow through this as quick as possible, too, because we got a lot of stuff to cover.
So normal banter-ish, maybe slightly light, but anyway, here's to Nvidia, because they were where we started all today.
Well, and they're actually probably one of the more exciting announcements that went on today. I mean, first off, they started with the 2060, the RTX 2060, which we knew this thing was coming for weeks. I mean, it's been in the leaks. We've seen even benchmarks released of it, and everyone was like, okay, this thing's shooting at the 1070 Ti range. There was some hype speculation saying even as high as a 1080. And to be honest, it's kind of all of that. There's some benches that it runs at about a 1070 level. Most of them, it runs at a 1070 Ti, and one or two, it actually ties with a 1080.
Yeah, so everything we've been seeing, and as just rumor, today all reviews started hitting as of the early this morning, and it's just, this is where everybody was thinking it was going to hit, but it's still a case of it's something that will give you about the level of a 1070 Ti performance with the added bonus of RTX and DLSS when that can actually do something, but the MSRP is only $350.
Yeah, $350, and it'll probably actually end up at $350 too, rather than the other RTX launch where all the cards were $100, $200 over MSRP.
And we'll see it. What is it? Next week? Next week.
Yes. And it's only got 6 gig of RAM, which was expected, of course. So it's got 2 gig less than the other RTX counterparts, as well as like a 1080, those kinds of cards that you might look at as an alternative purchase option. So you can live without the extra 2 gig of RAM, which if you're running at 1080p, like this card is kind of aiming for, you probably won't miss it, really.
And as I said, it's kind of what we were expecting, but I think it's all said, it's still nice to hear it and see it actually hitting. I think it was actually like slightly cheaper than we were originally expecting, but I can't remember anymore.
Yeah, I think there was a few people based on the pricing of the other RTX cards that were expecting this thing to land pretty solid up in the $400 mark, but they actually brought it down, and it's about $50 cheaper than the cheapest 1070 Ti.
Yeah, so that's either way. That's still a good card. Even I'm going, huh?
Yeah,
maybe.
We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get back to the benchmark stuff. Yeah, we're just kind of running down the keynote that Nvidia presented today. They gave some, off the cuff FPS benchmarks in games that were of particular concern to most people, like Battlefield 5, because that had all that negative press around turning on ray tracing and how it just totally tanked the performance. But
that's been patched a little bit since then. So
yeah, they've had a patch out there for a little bit now, which completely corrected a lot of that problem. Yes, you're still going to take a hit turning on ray tracing, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was before. You're not going to lose 3 or 4 quarters of your performance, Does that make sense?
I think so.
It tanked it pretty hard, but it's back to normal. You do take a performance hit, but it's not as significant as before at all. It provides playable 60 frames.
Yeah, a lot of the things I've been saying says yes, since they uh, put out their patches, it's put it up into the range where it's actually it's worthy to use.
Yeah.
So I've seen a couple of channels going, it's pretty and it's playable, so let's go with it.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't really get this card for the ray tracing part of it. I would get it because of the DLSS that it's capable of. Because out of everything that the card does, the DLSS is going to provide it with the best opportunity to be a killer card. Because it's got a low enough performance because it's a 60 model that it can't pull like steady 60 frames at 4K or 1440p, but you can still get a really good 1080p. But you enable DLSS and you can have that 1440p experience in titles that support it without having to put forth all the extra compute that would go into actually doing a 1440 render. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm waiting for the actual benches to tell me it though.
Yeah. And it's only going to be for games that have DLSS as well. And I think we're at what? Just shy of 20, 30 games that even have announced that they're going to support it.
Yeah, and so far I've not heard of one actually. Even Battlefield hasn't turned it on yet, to my knowledge.
Battlefield, I believe they did enable that. But the one that actually was announced as supporting DLSS today as well is Anthem. So
they did announce that one very explicitly as well.
Yep.
They showed off a nice little trailer, and well, it's pretty.
Yeah, we'll get to that too. They also announced the Max Q it's basically Turing for mobile, and so you'll be able to get these in the new things like Alienware laptops, your MSI gaming laptops, Asus, those kinds of like the Asus ROG Swift. Oh, that's the monitors. Oh, yeah, we got to talk monitors.
I'll do back to that in a second.
What? Come back to the monitors?
Yeah, we'll come back to that in just a second.
Yeah, in more depth. So keeping going. DLSS in action. They showed off some benchmarks. This one looks like it was a little clip from Anthem showing the ray tracing on and off with the DLSS. Oh, let's see. Other uses for Turing cards. Yeah. Oh, and a little bit about Ansel being turned on, like Injustice and Battlefield. All in all, a pretty eventful keynote. I think a lot of people were quite happy with came out of that.
Yeah, at least going on to the monitors, since you have to go back to monitors, since that was brought up, and they brought up quite a bit. Now, if you haven't heard of this, we'll cover it really quick. There's two competing sync options on monitors. One is the G-Sync for Nvidia. One is the AMD FreeSync. Mm-hmm. And if you get a monitor, usually it's going to support one or the other, which means you're probably going to be angling toward buying one monitor over the other, depending on what type of card you're getting. Well, Nvidia decided to open their range up a little bit and say some of those FreeSync, the AMD FreeSync based compatibility monitors, can handle G-Sync. Go for it.
Yeah, and this is actually something we've been hoping for quite a while, pretty much since FreeSync even came out as an answer to Nvidia's G-Sync, because it's an open standard. Anyone could implement it. A lot of monitors could just put it in, and if their panels could do some form of adaptive sync, then great. The downside of FreeSync was that it was a very wide market. You could qualify as FreeSync even if your panel wasn't up to snuff, so to speak. There's a lot of varying ranges that FreeSync works in, and sometimes you don't get what you were expecting. Whereas G-Sync, you had to be certified for it. You had a chip from Nvidia, all this extra hardware that would basically cause the monitor to be $200-$300 more than a FreeSync, similar monitor with FreeSync. So I personally have been turned off wanting to buy a G-Sync monitor because the price was so outrageously expensive compared to a similar FreeSync monitor. Especially if I'm running 3 monitors, I'm not going to want to shell out an extra $300 per monitor.
And
And so,
total 4 now.
yeah, and I got an Nvidia video card, I'll say it, and I really hesitated wanting to get one because I'm like, well, I'm probably going to end up with FreeSync monitors, and so I need to have an AMD card, but AMD didn't give me the performance I wanted out of my video card, and so I had to go with Nvidia. And so I've just been kind of shelving the idea of getting adaptive sync. But this is the announcement I was hoping for personally. Now, they list 12 monitors saying, oh, look, out of the 400 monitors we tested, only 12 passed. That's pretty much Nvidia saying, you know what? We were right about G-Sync. It's them covering their butt. And the 400 that didn't pass, they'll work with FreeSync too. The big thing was Nvidia said, we'll allow you to enable G-Sync or adaptive sync on any of these FreeSync monitors, and it's a you just get what you get kind of thing. They're not going to say it's going to work great or at all. They're just going to allow you to try, and you get what you get. So there's going to be a lot more customer review necessary for monitors running FreeSync and how well it works with Nvidia cards, because your mileage may vary, and obviously if you're not getting any of these 12 monitors that are certified, then yeah, definitely do your own research. But truth be told, I'm pretty sure most of the not $100 monitors are gonna do pretty well and be acceptable. I mean, the big qualifying thing for G-Sync that FreeSync doesn't require is what happens when you drop below 45 frames per second. FreeSync usually just turns off. G-Sync has to allow the monitor to be able to compensate for that and actually run well. And that's one of the big differences. Obviously, if you're running a good enough video card, you won't have to worry about what happens below 45 frames per second. But a lot of times, if you're not, like maybe an RX 560 or something running at 1080p Ultra, you're probably going to run lower than 45 frames per second, and your FreeSync isn't going to cover you. Just happens.
Yeah, one of the really big things about it is some of the times, while it may not be hitting 60 frames per second, or how high it could potentially ever go, really when it comes down to it, it's more about consistency of the frames. And there's a couple channels that will actually tell you this, and it's like, how consistent is it between some of those frames? And so if it can actually hold on to itself as it's trying to render everything without taking too long on like one frame too often, it won't be that bad. But if a card can't keep up that well, then you're going to start noticing it, and then becomes a bad experience. So, and so far, some of the reviews we've been seeing, if we like look at like with some of the monitors, that's where you end up seeing some of that. And then if we go back to like the 2060, that's kind of some of the things you have to look for when it comes to reviewing the reviews of the models, is how well does it actually hold up. And because we could say, it hit it, X number of frames per second, but it's a matter of how steady is that.
Yeah,
and
you got proper frame pacing, so that each frame is taking the same amount of milliseconds to run, then you're going to get a smooth experience. It's not going to do stuttering, and your adaptive sync is going to do really well for you. And the thing that V-Sync and stuff tries to hide is that poor frame pacing, where you have certain bits of the scene that take almost 100 milliseconds to render, just a one-off blip kind of thing, and that will show through in an adaptive sync as a stutter.
Yeah, so that's part of what a lot of it comes down to. And if you actually go and look at some of those channels where you're seeing your benchmarks, you're going to see them say, "Here's your high, here's your low, and here's your median average." And it's saying, here's how it can go. Okay, then the question is, how often does it, or how well is it actually keeping up with itself? And that's really more in a lot of channels. Some channels actually will look at that, but a lot don't. So you're going to want to start really paying attention to that kind of information.
Yeah, and the thing that I really like is sites like Tom's Hardware and such that actually show you frame pacing in their benchmarks, because you can see over time how long each frame took to render and what the frames per second was at different times in the scene. And they give you a nth percentile, like 99th percentile frames ended up being at a certain frame rate as opposed to the average frame rate. And that's kind of how you can tell whether you get a smooth experience in the game or not, is if that 99th percentile lines up pretty well with your actual average FPS. Because the smaller that gap, the more steady your frame rate was while playing the game.
But that's a lot of what we've been seeing there. And
it's going to be enabled in the drivers that will land on January 15th. So I'll probably be one of the first to download it too, just like everyone else. And I'll start watching reviews and looking for which monitor I want to get. I'm leaning more towards an IPS monitor due to the professional work I do on my home computer, as opposed to quality of gaming and Twitch gaming, especially at like a LED 1440 megahertz screen. Hertz screen. There we go. And what that would provide instead, you got different monitors that serve different purposes. And my purpose would require more of the IPS route as opposed to a gaming route, which is still more in the LED end kind of panels. Quantum dot might be interesting though. Still too expensive for me, in my opinion. IPS monitors, though, are becoming very affordable, and they have some great contrast and some very bright illumination. I'm quite happy with the IPS monitor I actually have at work. I managed to talk him into getting me a 1440p workstation set up with IPS monitor. So yeah, January 15th. All right. Should we talk about the 2060 review just a little bit? I mean, we did cover it a little bit in general terms, but let's get into some
basic information really quick. Well, quickly.
I mean, we can pretty much sum it up in just like one chart, like with Destiny 2. You can see the 2060. Well, actually, this one's probably not a very indicative one, but you got your 2060, which lands right next to the 1070 Ti pretty much in every benchmark except for one or two. And then the 1070 just lags slightly behind it. And let's see, Far Cry. Yeah, this one's a little bit more indicative here. You got the Vega 56, which is pretty much just breathing down the neck of the 2060. Most of the time, though, it's going to end up slightly lower, just between the 2060 and the 1070. And then we have the Vega 64, which sits above the 2060, below the 2070, and fills that mark right there. And then, of course, if you want to compare versus the RX 590, you have that landing quite significantly below the 1070, above the 1060, though. And that's kind of how it lays out in most of these game benchmarks. There are a few outliers, like with Destiny, where it's got a slight mix, where the Vega 64 ends up being below the 2060, but that's going to be game engine optimization for the specific hardware Nvidia over AMD or vice versa. And here's another one, Vega 64 over the 1070 Ti over the 2060 56, just all neck and neck right there. Now, it's kind of unfair to bring the 560 into a comparison against the 2060 because, I mean, you look at the Vega 56 and you can get it today for $369. I mean, that's pretty much in line with the 2060, but if you look at what the Vega 64 is, you can get a stock cooler card for $400 right now because guess what? AMD announced price cuts to the 56 and 64. And so you're going to be able to get it for a very comparable price, probably slightly below what these new cards are coming out as. It'll be an interesting market for sure. I'm thinking those are going to actually end up in effect before the 2060 is available in stores. But I just saw it like 2 days ago, the announcement that prices are getting. It looked like on that Vega 64 it already had happened because I believe 400 is where they were targeting with the Vega 64. So definitely do your research. Yeah, definitely do your research and figure out which card at what performance at what price point is right for you. And if you feel like flexing a little bit, spending just a little bit more on like a 2060 or 2070 even. Well, I don't think the 2070 is a little jump, but that's another story. You can get the 2060 with RTX, the ability for DLSS, and maybe ray tracing if you feel like turning it on for a pretty comparable price. And really, I think the prices are all pretty, dare I say, fair. I think the thing I'm saying is more in line with performance. So at whatever price point you're looking at, there's going to be a card priced appropriately. That's more, yeah. That's more what I'm trying to say is that it's going to be appropriately priced. Now they did bump the power consumption.
Just really quick to throw in before we jump into that. One thing else I've been seeing is a couple of reviews I've been looking at. They decided to go have a little fun and they actually came out and said the 2060 actually does a decent overclocking, and you can get some extra benches out of it. And some, at least in a couple of cases, they're able to push it up to neighborhood at least speeds of a 2070.
Mm-hmm.
And still keep it as a pretty usable card. But when there was a couple of things about how to take the card apart and what it takes to do that made it kind of interesting. So if you're looking at trying to overclock, A, you can do it pretty well. B, be prepared. It's going to be interesting. And there's a couple of videos out there that I've already watched showing what you're going to expect if you want to try to overclock it and put, like, for example, a water cooling cooler on that thing. So just something to be thinking about.
Well, at the very least, if you're planning on overclocking this card, you're going to want to take the cooler off and put some heat sinks on the MOSFETs and making sure all the RAM is in good contact with a heat radiating source like the heat sink or additional heat sinks that you might want to put on the card to help it.
Well, this one apparently does a decent job on its own, but from what I've been seeing, if you want to put on something better, getting the original off takes a bit more effort than previous cards.
Yes, there's like 7 screws and they use hot glue for most of it. So
as an example, I was actually watching a video from Gamers Nexus. So if you want to go watch that one, he also complains quite a bit about it.
Oh, yeah. He has an entire video about teardown on that thing.
Yep. So, yeah, if you want to see what it takes, if you're looking into something like that, there's a good example. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about.
And you can always just, sit on your hands and wait for a little bit because Gigabyte, like we covered before, has, 30 SKUs, 40 SKUs for this 2060? And so they got an entire scale here. You want one that's slightly cheaper with 3 gig of RAM, just watch out, make sure it has all of the CUDA cores that the actual benchmarked one here has, because, with the 1060, it did not. And so it provided worse performance at the same branding name. So careful with that. But they do have the aftermarket coolers on those, the usual wind force and the usual. So you'll probably have better cooling on those. Maybe get better thermals and audibles. So yeah, definitely check on that.
Yeah, so overall, it sounds like from my own, watching of the news is that overall it does a pretty decent job at what we're getting out of it. But you're going to really want to watch out for each of the models, as it all is going to come down to the actual cooling units that they're actually sticking on these things.
Yeah. And one thing to also keep in mind is it is a 160 watt card as opposed to the 1060, which is 120 watt card. So you'll be burning a little bit more power. It's got a 8-pin power connector on it instead of just a 3 or a 6-pin, I should say. So make sure you have the appropriate cables in your computer if you plan on getting this card, and that you have the proper amount of ventilation to dissipate that extra 40 watts.
Yeah, that extra wattage will add up fast.
Yep. And something to also look forward to in the same vein of video cards, the GPUs for Nvidia in 2020, so kind of their refresh or something of that nature. They're going to be on Samsung's 7 nanometer ultra violet process. So this is an interesting tidbit because TSMC was kind of the place that would make their cards for them, but they went with Samsung's 7 nanometer EUV process for their 2020 cards, supposedly. This is still rumor, not necessarily confirmed, but it seems reasonable considering TSMC has pretty much got their entire catalog booked for the foreseeable future between making Apple chips and pretty much most of AMD's video cards and CPUs, not to mention all of the other side stuff that they make in addition. So they're a very busy factory. They've been doing great, especially being able to land this 7 nanometer stuff that they licensed from Samsung. But they're not planning on rolling out the EUV stuff until later. They've already taped out 7 nanometer EUV chips, but they're not planning on transitioning to that until probably end of the year, if not early next. And the other cool thing is they actually have 5 nanometer risk production going into effect in Q2 of 2019. This year, Q2, that's just next quarter. And we're already talking 5 nanometer. So they're definitely coming along at a good clip. That kind of will circle back when we talk Intel, so we'll get back to that. You want to talk some consumer tech real quick?
This backpack thing?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was interesting. It's like, okay, Qi wireless charging brought to the end user with a backpack. They have
not the first time I've seen it though, but it's a bit more of a it's a better of a design I've seen.
Yeah,
easier to get to.
Yeah, you just got this little fold-out pocket. You just slide your phone into this rigid charging section of it, and just charges in your backpack while you're going to the next class or who knows what. I mean,
so this is coming from Targus, so someone that's a company that's makes a lot of accessories for mobile computing, especially.
Oh yeah, laptop backpacks and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they're really big on that. So docks, backpacks, etc. So it's described as something for all tech enthusiasts. Won't cover me in any kind of way, but
yeah.
For people, for the general person where they're having smaller devices, so they have something where now there's they can stick it to their phone and charge it on the fly, where it makes it a little bit more convenient. But it's also sized to be able to hold, at least I think it's how big does this thing actually say? How big?
I didn't see anything that covered it, but it looks like it's going to be your standard 15-inch laptop bag.
maybe a 14. I can't tell really. It's going to be 14, 15, somewhere in that range. But it's at least got, some of the basics you really need in there.
Yeah.
And it's currently stating, according to Targus, they're going to run this thing about $200, and it should be available in April.
So
we'll see. It looks pretty.
Yeah.
So
it looks functional, pretty sleek. I wouldn't say it's my favorite design, but it could be worse. I've seen worse.
Oh yeah.
Probably the next one that has me a little excited is Samsung unveiling their 75-inch 4K modular micro LED TV. This kind of goes with their what they called the wall, a huge 20 or a 212-inch display array of these micro LEDs. I think they had that last year. CES 2018. This is the consumer version, 75-inch. Each pixel is a micro LED, so you don't have a backlight or any of that kind of stuff, so you can get good blacks. They say this is a good alternative and is comparable to OLED, but you don't have to have those organics in it, so you don't have the problems that OLED has, which is things like burn-in, and if you put it in direct sunlight, it can have some fade. So this will be a really good alternative to that and give you the same kind of deep blacks that you would have got otherwise with the OLED.
This is only one of the things that Samsung was showing off. They showed off a whole host of devices, from some of their AI toys to, various new devices they can have around, including in the kitchen, so on and so forth.
They probably
showed off.
They probably had a dishwasher and some fridges as well.
Fridges, yes. Didn't show us much on the dishwasher, but on the TV, everybody was showing off TVs today, I swear. This was only one of the TV type devices that they showed off. The other one was a 98-inch behemoth that runs at 8K.
Yeah.
And has Bixby plugged into it, so you can actually have like their little thing like to use their phones for smart assistant to control it and reach shows and so on. Whereas this thing, it can be used as either standalone, or you can actually connect multiple together and use it for other purposes if you wanted to do so. So kind of like they did with the wall, you can actually run multiple of these things and have a giant array. So
yeah, so build your own screen size is basically what they're talking about here. And
I want that wall.
Yeah, I know. I would prefer 4 of these all nice and tied together and giving you an effective 8K screen. That would be great. So if Samsung, if you're listening, I'll review one for you. I'll send it back, I swear, maybe. But let's talk Anthem real quick. They just dropped a gameplay trailer that's Nvidia branded because, of course, they're showing off that they're enabling DLSS in Anthem. They call it a gameplay trailer, but all that they do is really just show you a viewpoint of your playing character without any of the GUI devices around on the screen. I mean, this is a very beautiful looking game. I mean, I'm playing the trailer right now, and you can see some of the gameplay. You got sun flare. This one, I guess, is being in row 1, but yeah, this big power station or whatever they're trying to play that off as, ancient ruins, just a variety of world content. And if you saw in the backdrop, that's actual world. That's not like pre-rendered distance like what you see in Destiny. That's actual world that you can travel to. I'm not going to tell you how I know that, but just the amount of variety and ways to play. I'm hoping it'll come off a little better than Destiny 2 did.
Hey, Turk, come play Destiny. Why? I don't want to buy that. Come on.
But you can see it's going to be available February 15th. They're dropping a playable demo on the 1st. So that'll be pretty cool to check out. Definitely looking at getting that maybe on launch. I got a whole backlog of games that I still have to. So I'll probably sit on my hands for a few months, maybe.
See how things turn out first.
Not necessarily see how it turns out. I'll probably end up with it just like I ended up with Destiny, but it looks like a good game. I'm hoping they do better than Destiny did, because Destiny was fun too. Don't get me wrong. Oh, I enjoyed the crap out of that, but it did kind of wane at the end game, and it's no fault of theirs. But well, actually, there was. Their guns were kind of, but I enjoyed it. I had fun with my guns that I had that I could tolerate, and I had to give up on some of the other ones that they gave out that just seemed like utter crap. But that's yeah, that's nitpicking. We don't need to go into that. So, Huawei, big name brand in China, they're showing off a MacBook Air clone, I guess you can call it. It's a Windows 10 based ultra light mobile laptop. It's actually slightly thinner than the MacBook Air. 15.9 for the MacBook Air and 14.9 millimeter for this. And it's got better specs, essentially, than what the MacBook Air has. It's packing i5 8265U, has 256 gig of storage, UHD 620 graphics, which is just part of the APU. You can max it out with 512 gig of storage and an MX 150 graphics card. Both, of course, 8 gig of RAM. And when you're getting something that's so ultra thin and light, you're not got a lot of wiggle room in what you're going to end up with, But it does have 2 USB-C ports, and they may or may not support Thunderbolt 3. No confirmation on that yet. You got your 1 megapixel front camera, and they're saying they're going to retail them in the US starting January 29th. So something to watch for. I'm sure the price is going to be just as prohibitively expensive as the MacBook Air. So up to you on which one you want. Actually,
might just write that one down and make note of it, so we can come, once it actually pops, we can go, hey, look at that.
Yeah, it's going to be a 1440p screen. I mean, actually, Huawei has a pretty good track record of bringing affordable electronics to the masses. And so, yeah, as much as I'm saying this might be expensive, it's probably not going to be overly so. Yeah, I would be shocked if this came out within $100 of the MacBook Air. I'm pretty sure it's going to be lower than that. Maybe we'll have to circle back around on that when it actually does come out, and we can see. Oh yeah, maxed out has i7 8565. I was wondering, it's like, no, they can't have just an i5 in it to max it out. But yeah, we'll have to circle back around, see what the price actually comes out with, so I can eat crow or not. Everyone likes to see me eat crow, right? You're like, no, I don't like pies. So Intel's keynote, I caught about half of this live and had to go back and watch the rest. Getting off work, all that.
But a little bit of it because I had to take off from work. Yeah. But I did catch the first part of this, which is where they started talking about
their SoC,
and showing off their SoC and some of the stuff they've actually stuffed onto this little thing.
Yeah, so they were really selling the AI portion of it. Like they had a little bit of a spiel. They're like, I thought you had to have a GPU to do AI, and the guy that we were talking with is like, yeah, we thought so too until we did this. And so they were showing off some of the AI functionality in Sunny Cove, and it's got a lot of changes to the architecture that should make it a little, if not notably, better than the Skylake architecture that we have right now on our desktops. Now, whether that's going to translate into significant performance gains in everyday use, that's yet to be seen. We don't have any of these to really prove that it works well. The only this is a 10 nanometer product, by the way. The only 10 nanometer we've even heard about so far has been a laptop, or was it a tablet chip, that only had 2 cores, 4 threads, and the GPU was disabled because of how poor the yields were. But this one, they've supposedly have reached HVM, which is the high volume manufacturing for this 10 nanometer product. And they're saying it's going to be for like 2-in-1s and devices like that. So you can already tell it's going to be a low power, low core count, probably heavily disabled chip as well. And for such a fringe thing, especially when it's not even going to hit until the holidays of 2019, I have a hesitation at calling it high volume manufacturing. But they've supposedly hit high volume, and we'll see. I would have thought, that would be 6 months out rather than 8 to 12, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there is thoughts that maybe they're seeding these chips as engineering samples, but complete in the package rather than just an engineering sample, so that they can be integrated by third-party partners and things like that. I would have thought they would do that in the engineering sample phase before they did the final tape out of the high volume stuff and actually ramped it up. But yeah, they could have accelerated it. It could be all skewumpus because of the 10 nanometer shakeup in not going according to plan at all. But we'll see.
And everything they've been saying right now is, look at this, shiny thing. But I mean, even this what they're talking about even today is, something for just small devices and nothing really. So far, at least using this for the desktop market I saw.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be a wait and find out to see if they actually pull off anything else. But this is all that they've told us so far. So okay, we have something new for the smaller units, but how this is going to turn out against desktops is going to be yet to be known. And we already know that, or at least we're highly banking on the idea that AMD is going to basically throw down the gauntlet come Wednesday.
That's what I'm anticipating. And we know pretty well that Intel doesn't really have anything in the way of 10 nanometer Ice Lake for the desktop until like 2020. Like February timeframe is when you should probably expect these chips to be purchasable for the actual next gen chips. If they come out with anything this year, it's going to be essentially your old Core 2 quad era where they just took 2 of their current chips and just glued them together on the same package. And it's going to work. It's going to provide you with performance uplift, but it's going to have the same drawbacks that we saw with the Core 2 quads. It's not going to provide good scaling. It's not going to do some of those things. Think of it as something more akin to what Threadripper in dealing with latencies and interchip communication and things like that. So I have my hesitations, but it's still going to perform. It's going to provide you with some good muscle, and I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled that out of their sleeve and said, this is what we're doing this year, because we already know based on leaks that they're planning on doing that kind of thing for Cascade Lake, their server chips. And it just stands to reason that they're going to glue chips together for desktop as well, just to stemmy the tide against what AMD is supposedly launching on the 9th. So definitely stay tuned for our coverage of that.
Yeah, we're going to be a little excited.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a morning thing. Luckily, it's in Nevada, so it's pretty much in line with our time zone, give or take.
The hard part is just be able to make sure that we can go, okay, does anything at work mean I'm going to have to miss this? No? Great. I'm going to do that.
I'm going to disappear for that hour during work. Sorry, boss. I don't know where I'm at. I'm just missing.
I've got something to work on. I need to be glued to my desk for the next hour.
No, I'm not even going to be hiding at my desk. I'm going to be sitting somewhere with my phone and headset listening to this announcement because it's going to be that cool, hopefully, based on what the leaks say. And I don't know about you, but a 16 core, 32 thread desktop chip for a mainstream platform just sounds really tempting.
Yeah, a lot of things. If even half these rumors are true, it's going to be a very fun hour.
Yes.
And at the same time, we're going to be going, my poor wallet, my poor wallet.
Shut up and take my money. Yeah. I mean, it would be the equivalent of Intel coming out and saying, we're going to release not their 8 core 9900K for $500, but a 12 core or a 16 core for $300 or $400. You know, that's just stupid crazy. We would all love that, right?
Yeah, just like we would never receive them because Intel tends toward the pricier side of,
Well,
everything.
they have the market for it. 80% of desktops are pretty much just going to be Intel. It's given because of business purchase and fan base, really. And they're just the de facto. And honestly, AMD probably couldn't handle the volume if they tried. If all of a sudden 50% of the desktops flipped to AMD, they wouldn't be able to provide enough chips. I think they would have to pretty much monopolize Global Foundry and TSMC's output in order to even come close.
It'll be fun to see if it happened.
Hey, I'm not saying it would be a bad day by any means. I think having the demand so pent up like that, I definitely, like I said, will probably be pre-ordering these chips if it comes out according to rumor and if they're actually going to perform. And usually I wait to see the actual benchmarks in action so that you don't run into like what we saw with Threadripper 2 with their 32 core 64 thread one where 2 dies weren't on a memory controller and had significant impact for that reason. Yeah. That's why you listen to reviews, you make sure that the CPU or whatever it is going to perform as expected.
But that's a lot of what we've been, we're working on or looking forward to and what we've heard about from today. And that's just the pre-day. Tomorrow's when things really get going. So,
yep. And there's so much stuff that we have to cover. We're probably going to actually release one video a day. Yeah, I mean, tomorrow's raid night, so we might have a short one, but we'll at least try to get something out, cover some of the highlights of tomorrow. Well, today, depending on when you're watching this. You probably already know how well we've done by the time you watch this, so do stay tuned.
Keeping up on even half of the news, as I said, there's a lot of stuff. We didn't even touch the little robot that Samsung was showing off.
Oh, we didn't touch half of the stuff, but we at least covered the stuff that's cool, immediately affecting us consumers, and is not stupid money. 8K 95-inch television, that's stupid money. Even if they were saying maybe 6,000 for it or whatever it was, or was that for the 75-inch? It's still stupid money in my opinion.
I don't think I heard anything for the 75.
Yeah, I define products that are so like niche and expensive that it's only people that live in LA that work in movies successfully would consider buying, or Bill Gates in his mansion. That's stupid money.
Yeah, and I don't. Anytime I see a TV that's over 1,000, it's like, really? I'll wait for that to come down.
I can see a use case all the way up to maybe a 3000 level, but like that short throw projector that did a 110-inch display for 10 grand. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was a 4K projector, but I still considered that stupid money.
Well, you know me. I'm the kind that's like, I like my toys, but at the same time, I go for cheap on a number of things. Like my TV here, I bought it for, like $400 8 years ago. So that's what I'm working with here.
But it doesn't have HDR, 4K, and FreeSync. Come on.
I'm good.
Hey, my TV has 3D, passive 3D because it's an LG. You know, that's how much I care. I haven't really turned on the the 3D except for a few times with Avatar. You remember that phase, right?
Yeah, it's been a few years.
Yeah. So that's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that alarm button on YouTube so you get notified when we release a new video, especially this week with CES. Do hit the subscribe button. Like the video. It definitely helps our placements as well. Be sure to check out Terkanil's channel as well. I have it in the description below. And we will see you hopefully tomorrow. Not the next day because AMD. Exciting stuff.
Have a good one.